The old house stood alone, a sentinel in the hollow. Yew trees, twisted and gnarled, clawed at its crumbling facade. Their shadows stretched long, like grasping fingers. Inside the house waited, patient, hungry. 5 strangers received an invitation. Each envelope bore a black wax seal, an imprint of a single malevolent eye. They came from different lives, drawn together by fate or curiosity, or perhaps by the house itself. There was Amelia, a haunted artist seeking inspiration; Dr. Julian Frost, a skeptical psychiatrist hoping to debunk the mansion's myths; Eleanor, a timid librarian yearning for adventure; Samuel, a jaded journalist chasing a career-defining story; and Grace, a renowned paranormal investigator determined to confront the darkness. None could resist the allure of Yew Hollow, the promise of the unknown, the whisper of a challenge. They were moths to a flickering flame, unaware of the inferno that awaited them. A blanket of fog shrouded the hollow as the guests arrived. One by one, their cars crawled up the overgrown driveway. Each set of headlights briefly pierced the gloom, revealing the mansion in all its decaying grandeur. Amelia stepped out of her car, a shiver running down her spine. The air felt heavy, laden with unseen menace. Dr. Frost, ever the pragmatist, scoffed at the atmosphere. He saw only crumbling stone and neglected gardens. Eleanor, clutching her worn copy of The Haunting of Hill House, felt a thrill of fear mixed with anticipation. Samuel, cigarette dangling from his lips, surveyed the scene with a cynical eye. He smelled a story, a chance to expose the truth, whatever it may be. Grace, her eyes sharp and alert, was the last to arrive. She carried herself with an air of quiet confidence, her gaze lingering on the mansion's darkened windows. She sensed something ancient and powerful lurking beneath the surface. The house was awake. It was watching them. The heavy oak door creaked open, as if reluctant to reveal its secrets. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of shadows and dust. Cobwebs draped the furniture like ghostly shrouds. The air hung thick and still, heavy with the weight of forgotten years. A grand staircase dominated the entrance hall, its steps worn smooth by time and countless unseen footsteps. Portraits of stern-faced men and women stared down from the walls, their eyes seeming to follow the guests as they moved. A sudden gust of wind slammed a shutter against the side of the house, the sound echoing like a scream in the silence. The guests started, their nerves on edge. The house was toying with them, testing their resolve.
Well, this place certainly has atmosphere.
His words held a nervous edge, betraying his outward composure. The others murmured in agreement, their voices hushed in the oppressive stillness. Amelia, drawn by an unseen force, found herself in a dusty old aviary. Empty cages hung from the ceiling, their rusted bars twisted and broken. The air was thick with the phantom scent of feathers and decay. A fluttering shadow darted past her face. Amelia gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel unseen eyes watching her, their gaze filled with a cold, predatory hunger. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. Amelia's greatest fear, the fear of her own creative stagnation, manifested as a monstrous bird. Its eyes, like glowing embers, burned into her soul. It screeched, the sound a horrifying symphony of every artistic failure she had ever experienced.
No, I won't be controlled by you.
She clutched her sketchbook, her lifeline to sanity. The bird lunged, its talons outstretched. Section 5, Whispers in the Library. Dr. Frost, his skepticism crumbling, wandered into the mansion's library. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines cracked and faded. The scent of aged paper and leather filled the air, tinged with a faint mustiness. He ran his fingers along the spines, his mind racing. He had always believed in logic, in reason, but the house, its very essence, defied explanation. It whispered to him, challenging his carefully constructed worldview. A book flew off a shelf, narrowly missing his head. Dr. Frost spun around, his heart pounding. He saw nothing, but he could feel a presence in the room with him, something ancient and malevolent. Whispers slithered through the air, taunting him with his deepest fear, the fear of his own mortality, the terrifying unknown that lay beyond the veil of life. Dr. Frost, his face pale, sank into a chair, his mind teetering on the brink of madness. Section 6. Reflections in the Mirror. Eleanor, drawn by a childlike curiosity, discovered a nursery. A rocking horse stood frozen mid-gallop, its painted eyes staring blankly ahead. A crib lay empty, its bars cold and silent. A tall, ornate mirror stood against one wall, its surface clouded with age. Eleanor, mesmerized, stepped closer. Her reflection wavered, distorted, as if the mirror itself were alive. Her reflection stretched, becoming taller, thinner, taking on a life of its own. It mocked her, whispering her greatest fear, the fear of insignificance, of a life half-lived, of never truly connecting with another soul.
Leave me alone, Eleanor pleaded, her voice small and shaky.
But the reflection only laughed, its voice a cruel parody of her own. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in, suffocating her. Section 7. The Observatory of Oblivion. Samuel, ever the cynic, stumbled upon a hidden observatory, a massive telescope pointed towards the night sky, its brass fittings tarnished with age, charts and maps covered in cryptic symbols littered a nearby desk. He peered through the telescope, his gaze drawn to a distant swirling nebula. It pulsed with an eerie light, drawing him in, beckoning him towards the vast emptiness of space. The room began to spin, the telescope transforming into a monstrous vortex. Samuel staggered back, his stomach churning. His greatest fear, the fear of oblivion, of his life's work amounting to nothing, washed over him. This is just a trick, he muttered, trying to convince himself. But the vortex pulsed, pulling him closer, threatening to swallow him whole. His cynicism felt paper-thin against the reality of the abyss. Section 8. The Sorcerer's Workshop. Grace, guided by her intuition, found her way to a secret chamber. Alembics and crucibles sat atop dusty workbenches surrounded by shelves stacked with strange ingredients. The air crackled with residual energy, the lingering essence of dark magic. A heavy grimoire lay open on a lectern, its pages filled with arcane symbols and diagrams. Grace recognized the language. It was ancient Sumerian, the language of sorcery and forbidden knowledge. As she read, the room seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. She felt a presence behind her, cold and menacing. It whispered in her ear, feeding on her deepest fear, the fear of losing her connection to the living, of becoming one with the darkness she hunted. "You cannot frighten me," Grace said, her voice firm. She closed the grimoire, severing the connection, but the presence remained, swirling around her, a vortex of shadows and fear. Section 9. Confronting the Darkness. The guests, each shaken by their individual encounters, found themselves drawn back to the grand staircase. They stood together, a tapestry of fear and defiance, united against the unseen force that held them captive.
This house, Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. It's alive.
It's feeding on our fear, Eleanor added, her eyes wide with terror.
We have to find a way to fight back, Grace said, her gaze filled with determination. This house is a conduit, a vessel for something darker, something older.
They searched the mansion, their hearts pounding in unison. Finally, they discovered a hidden chamber behind a crumbling tapestry. Inside, a single mirror stood on a pedestal, its surface reflecting a swirling vortex of darkness. Section 10. Breaking the Curse. The grimoire had spoken of the mirror, a conduit to another realm, a prison for a malevolent entity, an ancient sorcerer who had sought immortality and found only eternal torment. The mansion, built upon his bones, was a reflection of his twisted soul.
We have to destroy it, Samuel said, his voice hoarse with fear.
But how? Dr. Frost asked, his skepticism replaced by a chilling certainty. This is beyond anything I ever imagined.
Grace stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the mirror. The sorcerer's fear, his greatest weakness, was the passage of time, she said, her voice echoing in the chamber.
She pulled out a silver locket, a family heirloom passed down through generations. Inside, a single withered rose, preserved in time, lay nestled against a faded portrait of a young woman.
This rose, Grace said, her voice trembling slightly. It represents the beauty and fragility of life, the one thing the sorcerer could never possess.
She held the locket up to the mirror, the rose reflecting in its depths. The mirror shrieked, the vortex of darkness within churning violently. The mansion groaned, its very foundation shaking. With a final ear-splitting crack, the mirror shattered. The vortex imploded, sucking in the darkness that had haunted the mansion for centuries. The house shuddered, its walls crumbling, its roof collapsing inward upon itself. The guests, caught in the maelstrom, held on for dear life, and then silence. Dust rained down around them as they picked themselves up from the wreckage. The mansion, once a symbol of fear and despair, was no more. They emerged from the ruins battered but alive. The house was gone, but the experience had changed them, bound them together in a way they never could have imagined. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, forever marked by the horrors of Yew Hollow. The sun, breaking through the clouds for the first time in what felt like an eternity, bathed the hollow in a warm golden light. The nightmare was over, but the memory, like the gnarled branches of the yew trees, would remain. a chilling reminder of the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world.